Hello, everyone. It's 3 o'clock and it's time to start with our new webinar, with our new academic forum within the project on the integral theory of the future of the European Union, which is also sponsored and supported by the Slovenian Research Agency. My name is Matej Aubal. I'm a professor of European law and the chair of today's panel and the director of the aforementioned project. It's my great honor today to welcome with us three really excellent speakers from three different countries who are going to touch upon the subject of judicial reforms in comparative perspective, namely in three countries, in Croatia, Slovakia, and Slovenia. I'm greeting among us, first of all, Professor Alan Uzelac, who is head of the Department of Civil Procedure at the University, at the Faculty of Law of the University of Zagreb. Our students also know Alan Uzelac because he is from time to time a visiting professor at the European Faculty of Law. But all my students know Professor Uzelac because I keep assigning his famous article on the survival of the third legal tradition in all my classes that touch upon the rule of law and democracy, either in Slovenia or beyond. Our second guest is Kamil Baranik, Professor Kamil Baranik. He's a professor of constitutional law and a head of the constitutional law department at the Faculty of Law Matej Bel University at Banska Bystrica in Slovakia. And finally, there is Judge Jan Zobec. He's a justice at the Supreme Court of the Republic in Slovenia. And before that, he was acting as a constitutional court judge at the Constitutional Court of the Republic of Slovenia. So the point of departure of today's discussion is actually something that we already discussed within our academic forum, and that's the annual EU Rule of Law report that was published by the European Commission a few weeks ago. We have discussed that, we have debated and dissected that report in great detail already within the framework of our project and also within one of our academic forums. Since we focus just on the case of Slovenia, we decided within our research group to extend a little bit our perspective and to shed light also on the comparative experiences of some of the countries that are in that or another way, typically historically, but also in terms of legal tradition related to the legal tradition and to the experience of the rule of law in Slovenia and in the functioning of judiciary. So today we decided that we are going to proceed in two steps. In the first part of this talk, I'm going to inquire with our three presenters about the problematique that the judiciary faces in their respective countries. And having heard from them, in the second step, I will invite them to put forward some constructive proposal as to how to reform the judiciary in these three states. During this discussion, you, the audience, will be warmly invited to participate by sending your questions in our chat room. I'm going to follow what you're going to, the questions that you'll be raising, and I will be addressing those questions to our cherished professors. So Alan, as we decided, let me start with you. A few weeks ago, I came across your paper, or actually broader notes, in which you are discussing quite comprehensively the problematique of judiciary in Croatia. Can you share with us some of those problems that you have identified, some of the problems that you think are the most burning and they are the most acute with regard to the functioning of judiciary in Croatia?
Thank you very much. Let me just see if we can see each other and hear each other. I hope the connection is working. I would first like to thank you, Matej, for this very kind introduction. this is a kind of a race of the last. I mean, this is a collection of speeches on judiciaries that have been so far usually at the very back of the lists of public trust in the European Union, at least. And this, well, it gives us an ungrateful pleasure of discussing about something that has already been experienced as a pronounced crisis. Now, I would first like to make a kind of a disclaimer, actually a couple of disclaimers. First, I would like to say that I think Croatia and Slovakia are probably one case, and Slovenia is a little bit different case, because according to at least the objective data that has been collected by the European Union, Slovenia is bad, but not so bad as Croatia and Slovakia. At least public trust in Slovenian judiciary is some 10% higher than in our countries that were at the very back of the top lists. This is probably not saying too much, but it also tells something. It shows that a public debate, a panel like this one, is imaginable and, well, feasible in Slovenia, while I'm not so sure that something like that would currently be really workable in Croatia. And I think this is the problem that we have to start with. We still haven't come to the awareness of the far-reaching nature of the problem that we have. By the way, you're referring to my paper, which was written very pragmatically. I would like to say how it was written. I was asked by a friend of mine, Professor Josip Kregar, who recently died. So unfortunately, that was something that gives it even a little bit of a homage, a function. This was probably one of his last tasks when he tried to assist a political party, it was a Social Democrat party in Croatia, to produce something for the coming elections. And he asked me to produce a platform that could be used for that party. And not that I'm a big fan of the party or any other party in Croatia. I'm occasionally approached by political parties from different sides of the spectrum. They ask me to provide a critical assessment, and I usually do it. And well, most of the time it gets used for a couple of weeks before the election, and then it gets discarded. My current project, by the way, is now, this text that you have has later been adopted by a platform called Možemo, which is now a kind of a green left coalition. But again, it was just for the sake of framing their position towards the judiciary. Before that, I was also approached by the right-wing parties like Most, and again, it was a very nice collaboration. You always talk, they listen, and nothing is being done. Anyway, I think this is really a good starting point. We have to be aware that a problem is a difficult problem. And I would now try to compress whatever I have written, and I hope that you have distributed my text, which is in the meantime translated both into Slovenian and into English language, so you can read more about that in detail. But I would like to emphasize just a few points. First point, well, I would like to cite my distinguished colleague, who is an unfortunate past president of Croatia, Professor Ivo Josipovic, who was also participating occasionally in discussions about Croatian judiciary. And usually he ended his speeches by stating that Croatian judiciary is a state within a state. And then there was a full stop. More or less, he then waived the, any other intervention there, and he passed on to more sexy political issues like international relations or something. Judiciary is very difficult. But really, I think this statement is also a very telling statement. It shows us that in Croatia, but I'm not sure that it's only Croatia, the judiciary has become too much focused on its own issues, and the needs of the users, which should be in the focus of work of any national judiciary, have been to a larger or smaller extent neglected. And we also have a problem which is kind of similar, but probably, again, aggravated due to the nature of our situation. It is that judiciaries generally, especially civil justice systems, are now losing the battle with the challenges of contemporary time. Meaning, well, speed is inadequate, technology of work is old-fashioned, digitization is at a very early stage, and in particular, the ability to deal with complex social problems is well, much behind what would be expected from a system like that. And indeed, well, we have old topics, the processes, judicial proceedings are slow and repetitive, and we have the avoidance of responsibility in hot issues because it is unpleasant. And again, it's much easier to focus on your own problem. Another problem is the organizational problem. Judicial organization in Croatia, just like in some other places, but again, more interestingly, in some specific areas like appellate jurisdiction right now, this organization is ineffective. We have too many courts, and now we have even a very, well, a caricatural system of lottery of appeals, because the appeals in Croatia now are being assigned from 24 first instance courts to 15 courts of appeal according to a random algorithm. Again, a sign of a political inability to envisage a reform which would be well, let me use this again, normal, which would be logical. Why? Because again, territory of the courts is very much linked to political issues like local politicians and counties which want to have their own courts. User friendliness. Again, I think we only need to discover user friendliness in judiciary. This has been on the agenda, I think, for some 20 years in Europe. Help desks in courts and things like that are now popping up everywhere. In Croatia, we are at a very, very early stage, and this is more window dressing than a proper initiative. And well, on the top of it, we have structural problems. And I think these are very important problems. I think, well, we have to realize that the quality of legal work is at best mediocre, that the trends are negative, that the quality of legal thinking is sometimes disastrous, even at the highest level of judicial hierarchy. And this is the result of the trends which were negative in the selection of judges and other judicial officials, because, well, very few of my best students now wish to become judges or state attorneys. Lawyer, being a lawyer, it's still a kind of fashionable, because with some procedural tricks you can still earn a lot of money, but this is what probably is the only motivation of those who score better at the university. Everybody wants to go to, well, international politics, diplomacy, or work even at the university, no matter how, well, difficult that work becomes lately. Why? Of course, judicial structures have always been bureaucratic, especially during socialist times. Being in the court, it was just a kind of a little bit higher echelon of state administration within the system of unity of state power. But this has remained the case. And now bureaucratization, hierarchy, and also mediocre quality of the staff leads us to additional transitional problems like clientelism, nepotism, and even a fair amount of hidden corruption, although this is always difficult to demonstrate. So what is the result? The result is that users are, and I would say it's a relatively recent trend, because so far we were used to quite different approach. So users are now leaving judiciary. Courts now have less users than they used to have. And I think it's not only in Croatia, but Croatia is now experiencing a reverse trend. We used to speak about overburdened courts. We used to speak about too many court cases. Well, now we don't have anymore so many cases. We still have one of the largest, if not the largest number of judges per capita, but we don't have even enough cases for some courts. This doesn't mean that the lack of cases has made adjudication much faster. There are still no empirical evidence that the processes really advance much more quickly. But we can see that it is more like, well, leaving the sinking ship. How? Well, users, whenever they can, and they cannot really always avoid judiciary. Sometimes you have to go to courts to settle your issues. But if they can, they like to opt for other solutions, for autonomous solutions, negotiations, sometimes using alternative methods, and so on. The state is also giving up on courts. And I would say that this is a trend which arises, again, out of desperation. A mismatched concept of judicial independence has led to a situation where state political factors have very little at their disposal as instruments to improve the situation in judiciary. And of course, they don't have a good strategy for that too. So what's going on? We have a number of issues where court activities are being given to private agents, outsourcing, for instance, to public notaries or to quasi-commercial agencies like financial agency. We can see also further trends in the enforcement proceedings. State is trying now to also, well, give this to their political and, we can say political elites are giving some profitable functions which used to belong to the courts to their allies and those who could then probably support these allies. And this is mostly a irreversible process, because once you let this happen, it's much more difficult to have it reversed. So what is again the result? We have the rise of price for access to legal protection. Indeed, we have a very lacking system of legal assistance and advice. And I'm finishing here. I think the main issue is that we now have to try to reverse the trends and put judiciary a little bit back from this distancing from the rest of society, which has been, well, mainly justified by, again, I would say, the wall of judicial independence notion. We need to establish a dialogue and, well, the closure for public criticism, which has so far been very characteristic for our judiciary, is something that would need to be changed.
Thank you very much, Alan, for this succinct and yet comprehensive description of an indeed worrisome situation in Croatia. We will get back to it as we will discuss the potential reforms to address these problems. But now I'd like to move to our friend, colleague Kamil. Kamil, we chatted a little bit before this forum, and a little bit of that popped up also here in Slovenia news about the great scandal that is actually affecting judiciary in Slovakia. So tell us, I mean, in comparison to Croatia, are you suggesting that things can be even worse?
First of all, Matej, thank you very much for an invitation to this panel. I'm really deeply honored to be included into the list of the distinguished panelists. So, and now I will turn to Slovakia. Hopefully everyone can hear me right now. And so I will start and I will divide the situation in Slovakia regarding judiciary into two phases or two acts. First act is something similar to what has been already said about Croatia. And in Slovakia, we do have those kind of problems that are maybe not only typical for Slovakia, but for all post-communist countries that are somehow dealing with the hierarchical model dominated by judges that have been nominated in pre-liberal times. And especially in Slovakia in 2000s, there were many judges that were trying to somehow adopt some abusive techniques within the system in which they dominated the entire judiciary. So I would say that some academics have been claiming for a long period of time that the revolution, which in Czechoslovakia at that time was known as Velvet Revolution of 1989, happened only in political branches, and it didn't touch the judiciary. So the meltdown of the communism was only or happened only in political branches, but not really touched the judiciary. And that is why maybe many old practices, close-minded proceedings and textual interpretation and formalistic thinking have been so dominating or have been dominating the system of decision-making. Some really weak decisions, weak justifications of really sometimes quite not understandable decisions in various different or similar cases in which the decision came into different other ways. And the public perception, as in Croatia, in Slovakia, is just terrible. And according to the European Commission, and was basically also coined with the self-aggrandizement of judiciary through various statutory interpretations, statutory regulation, and the decision of Constitutional Court. So in contrast to Croatia, it is right now quite obvious that the politicians didn't ignore the judiciary, but created certain kind of pact with the judiciary, especially with judges, in terms of some really highly politicized decisions. Some of the judges, moreover, some of the judges became enormously rich without any reasonable evidence how they could manage to gather such wealth. Even though the judges in Slovakia, they do not have low salaries, they are constitutionally precluded from seeking any other financial compensation, of course, to preclude their political biases. So their income is basically it's easily calculatable. So it's possible to calculate how much money they can really have, but the lifestyle of some judges gain really public attention. But the judiciary didn't change or didn't change the approach, and these suspicions were never officially confirmed. But the truth is that there has never been a serious investigation of ambiguities, and especially in those links between income and actually assets of judges. So those things were quite visible in Slovakia for many years, but nothing really happened in that regard. So, and now we are turning to the second act. The second act that started with a terrible crime and killing of one journalist and his fiancée, in late 2018 or in the beginning of 2018. And it started to change the entire landscape, political landscape in Slovakia. And afterwards, I'm just saying that what really happened, what was the instigator or initiating point of time, why the situation changed. And now we see the revelation of serious criminal activity associated with possible unlawful conduct of judges and prosecutors. So the situation, as I mentioned, the situation started to change in 2018, and it gained momentum, especially after March 2020, when we had a general election, the election to the parliament, and then the leadership of the police, of the special investigators, and the Minister of Interior were replaced by the people outside of the circle of previous political establishment that ruled the country for almost 12 years. And then what happened in Slovakia, what is being happening since 2020 is that the enormous wave of indictments or charges or accusations against the judges from all levels of judiciary, including the former state secretary of the Ministry of Justice, and she was a judge as well, and then also charges of vice president or former vice president of the Supreme Court, and the former prosecutor general, the incumbent special prosecutor, who was especially appointed to charge the most serious crimes of corruption, bribery, and abuse of powers. And the entire former leadership of the police and the special investigators, all of them were indicted, and some of them are still under arrest. Many claims are being investigated at the moment, and I, of course, value the presumption of innocence, and no one has been found guilty yet, but some of the judges accepted the criminal accusations and have started to cooperate with the investigators. So in that regard, what I'm talking about in the Act 2 or second act in Slovak judiciary is like it is revelation of a huge web that is on that is not personal, but as you can see, the entire situation is somehow systematic. So there has been apparently a systematic abuse of power, and basically judiciary cooperating with special investigators as well as prosecutors created a web or factory of for the decisions that were in line with the political preference or preferences of political parties. I'm not trying to accuse anyone because I'm not to do that, but there are so many various suspicions on that level, which has become not only among academics, of course, among the general public, a confirmation of their perception of horrendous situation in Slovak judiciary for so many years. So we are not right now trying to maybe address little issues or getting rid of children's diseases of the transition of democracy to democracy, because this is something that is going on in most of the post-communist countries. We right now have a deeply embedded corruption, which from allegedly came very close to obviously or clearly. And in recent months, the public saw judges in handcuffs, firstly being transported to the police interrogations in connection to investigation of criminal offenses such as corruption, bribery, and abuse of powers. So the worst crimes possible for judges and for those gatekeepers that should safeguard the rule of law in country, in every single democratic country. So as I mentioned, the presumption of innocence is of highest value, but on the other hand, we have to really seriously consider what is going on in judiciary in Slovakia, because the principle of independent judiciary that has evolved into really extremely powerful principle, even confirmed by the Constitutional Court in 2019 when it decided to declare constitutional statute unconstitutional because of the breach of the principle of independent judiciary, became basically, or was converted into a source of unaccountable judiciary. So we are right now seeing that the judiciary and the independence of judiciary is not everything. You cannot get you cannot get everything from the principle of independent judiciary, because sometimes it can really turn into unaccountability, and that's a really huge problem of our country. And I think we will discuss those issues further on in reforms that are being planned in Slovakia, because there are some of them right now on the table at the parliament. But I think this is a part of your further questions.
Thank you, Kamil. This was an indeed breathtaking presentation. It is indeed a very worrisome situation where, when, as you described, the so-called independence turns not just into the unaccountability, but in a dense, systematic web network of abuse of judicial power. I have some questions with that regard. I'm also sure that some people in our audience might raise some questions. But before doing so, we should move on to Jan Zobec. As you can see, Jan is sitting in his judicial chambers at the Supreme Court of Slovenia. So he's not a professor. He's not someone who is observing the situation from the outside, but he's an actual player in the field. He's an actor from the inside of judiciary. And I invited him because many years ago, I think it must have been already in 2013 or around that time, Jan published an article that was for the first time revealing acute problems of Slovenian judiciary. There was no follow-up to that article in the sense that there would be a critical approach to it, a self-critical approach on behalf of the judiciary. But what we have followed was a sort of a silencing attempt, and even accusing of the accusations of Jan that he had actually opened up a Pandora box that will will open up the floodgates for the political interference with judiciary. So Jan, maybe if you could talk a little bit, but shortly, because I think we could even afford ourselves today to hear more from our guests. If you could talk a little bit about the most acute problems that you continue to see at your work as a Supreme Court judge, and as someone who spent his entire career in the Slovenian judiciary, from the court of first instance up to the Constitutional Court. Please, Jan.
Thank you, Matej. Thank you for your invitation. It's my great pleasure to take part in this discussion. Well, but in order to understand deficiencies in Slovene judiciary, let me first briefly explain the course of events in Slovene judiciary since the collapse of the totalitarian regime. Because I always claimed, and I still do, that the most of shortcomings and backsliding derives therefrom. The model of the United Power, referred also as dictatorship of proletariat, was at that time, at the dawn of democracy, swiftly replaced by the system of separation of powers. And judiciary has been recognized as a third branch and hence given independence almost overnight. Under the new conditions of market economy and private initiative, courts being unprepared to such tectonic change were forced to deal with important yet also hard and complex cases. However, a vast body of Slovenian judiciary, which was created as a mass organization in which individual judge counted little, remained almost the same and untouched. Slovenia, like the vast majority of other post-communist countries, could not rely on colonialization of the judicial sector. We didn't have Western Slovenia as eastern part of Germany had. And despite restoration clause in the Judicial Service Act, none of the judges was refused a permanent term of office. The transition to liberal democracy and the rule of law has therefore taken place with the old personnel, born, raised, and trained in the totalitarian regime. Hence, it came as no surprise that the authoritarian legal culture and corresponding ethics of obedience, which is reflected in submissiveness, meekness, political opportunism, correctness, political correctness, and consequently the judge's self-censorship remains preserved and stayed in the impenitent thoughtfulness of the old regime as a heritage of old totalitarian period. It is preserved there, and in an autopoietic manner it feeds and fertilizes itself mentally with values and ideological points of view through the very institutionally closed nature and self-sufficiency. So it's certainly not a problem of institutional structure or judicial independence. However, the crucial problem is the lack of individual, personal, and mental independence of judges. The catch is not institutional independence. However, the crucial problem lies in so-called micro-independence. Therefore, the paramount problem of Slovene judiciary is judiciary itself, and the politics embedded in it, deeply embedded, characteristic and striking feature of the Slovenian social judiciary, belonging to the authoritarian culture and corporatist liberal mentality, which survived formal, let's say, legal transition to liberal democracy. So, in a nutshell, what's the characteristic of such a authoritarian mentality and collectivist legal mindset? It could be expressed through the saying of Croatian judge, Luxembourg judge, Professor Rubin, said it's the proclamation and imposition of one truth as universal and final. So, what happened then? In the pre-accession period during transition wave, which took place immediately after the democratic revolution and during the pre-accession wave, there was some hope that things will improve. But mostly after 2008, things went worse. I mean, here the way how the president of the Supreme Court was then appointed, elected, and then came the scandalous Patria case, serial of criminal proceedings, more than 20 of them, against the then mayor of Maribor, which all of them failed. Scandalous proclamation of the Supreme Court that only those decisions of Strasbourg Court will be accepted, respected, and followed, which correspond to the Slovenian Supreme Court viewpoints and positions. And this proclamation opposing the right to oral hearing, which kind of proceedings was published on the Supreme Court's official website. In this moment coincides with the boasting of the same leadership how progressive and advanced they are in respecting and promoting procedural justice. Then followed attempts to get rid of judges who criticize too much, to speak publicly of malpractices in recruiting judges and their promotion, and who asserted the right to freedom of expression in criticizing the wrongdoing of the leadership of the judiciary. Then followed proceedings before the so-called ethical commission against our judges. And also transparency of judicial judicial decisions has been diminished. Not long ago, a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court handed down judgment denying journalists access to first instance judgments, recalling supremacy of the interpretative principle of lex specialis de rogas lege generali over constitutional coherent interpretation of law. In this case, constitutional provisions demanding publicity of proceedings and judicial decisions. So, to sum up quickly, the main problem is authoritarian culture, corporate and collectivist mentality, then lack of constitutional and societal mentality based on internalization of the values of constitutional democracy. Then, in deep examination of example and cases of miscarriages of the rule of law shows that most of these were possible exactly due to strongly protected institutional independence of judiciary in its self-government on the synergetic axis, judicial council, and court president. Then further enhanced power of the court presidents. Most of the president of the Supreme Court is also empowered to adopt the schedule of jurisdictions, which determines not only the specific jurisdictions of the individual panels, but also assignment of judges to the panels. And he also renders opinion on the candidates of the Supreme Court judges, when he may again ignore the opinion of the chamber of justice. That's what all strengthens bureaucratic and oligarchic structure of judiciary, which in turn becomes also susceptible to especially informal and disguised political influences. Further, permanent control and supervision of ordinary judges by higher courts and senior judges, it does not allow for a great degree of positive deviation from judicial mainstream. Then I mentioned before lack of transparency. First instance judgments are still not published. Neither are photos of members of Supreme Court nor their bios. Most proceedings before High Court are done in camera, present, camera excluded also in respect of plenary sessions and sessions of particular chambers. Even sessions of the Judicial Council are taking place behind the firmly closed door. So then, judiciary still acts as a massive organization. And I have to, excuse me, but I have to mention the project titled Adjudicating Together. And with its introduction to the judge mentor, advisor or supervisor to the judge beginner, who controls and directs the younger colleague's work and provides him with the proper advice. And this all leads to a situation in which Slovenian ordinary judge, no matter the court, is constantly under stress, even duress, not only due to expectations from the outside society and politics, but mostly because of constant nagging by the presidents, foremost the president of the Supreme Court, to resolve more and more cases and to maximum expediency. The quality demands completely overshadow quality of education. The maximum quantity over quality absolutely predicts.
Okay,
Then
Jan, sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah.
Since, I mean, of course, there are numerous problems. Thanks,
Yeah.
we can still touch upon that. I will now, since we are running out of time already a little bit, and we still have to touch upon the potential the potential reforms. We also have a question about the Jan, if you can maybe just mute yourself, please, so that we don't get interrupted. We already have a question from one of the members in the audience about how to limit corruption in the judiciary. So maybe I will now start in the reverse. Maybe start with you, Kamil, because I know also from the news that Slovakia started to implement some serious reforms. And maybe if you can really, in a few words, explain what exactly is being done, and then we can reflect whether that model can be also translated into other countries.
Thank you for the floor, Maciej. First of all, there is a reform of judiciary, maybe the most important reform of judiciary since the inception of the Slovak Republic right now, being discussed in the parliament. But this reform is not really reflecting on those really systematic charges that I have been explaining, because those charges and the level of seriousness has been revealed during past weeks. So it's not really something that could be taken into consideration while drafting the amendment, the constitutional amendment that should reform the judiciary. But what is right now in the parliament in Slovakia is basically reform of the judiciary on a constitutional level. It is touching upon constitutional court a little bit, and then a general judiciary. Most of those changes are basically more cosmetic than I would say profound, systematic, under my view. So what is going on especially, and what are the political responses to what is going on, and maybe the constitutional amendment will be amended in the process of draft of while the draft will be proceeded in the legislation process. So maybe what is the most important thing right now at the moment is the investigation of the properties and ownership of the judges. Maybe something that is much more profound in comparison to what has been done in the past. Right now, one of the most significant changes is to introduce the administrative judiciary in Slovakia, which we don't have at the moment. And the head of the administrative court should be, of course, the Supreme Administrative Court. That should be in charge of disciplinary proceedings against judges, prosecutors, and also attorneys. And to take it away from those self-regulating bodies or self-governing bodies of respective professions, to put it to some neutral or at least unbiased authority that should be in charge of investigating. So this is maybe the most significant change, is disciplinary proceedings, and then also the power of Judicial Council to investigate more of the especially of the assets of judges, not only of judges, but also their relatives, which is also a thing that has been camouflaging basically the assets and wealth of some particular judges that are not capable of explaining where they got the money. And sometimes they are just not blaming, but they are just trying to explain the origin of their source from their parents and from relatives and so on. So this is another thing. But for me, what is the most important thing in judiciary is basically the process of selection of judges. This is undoubtedly the most important vital instrument to just let in certain judges that are capable of neutrality, and they are just preaching basically the principles that are living according. So certain values should be, according to my opinion, considered as sacrosanct for the judges. But after what we saw, the breakdown of respect to fundamental principles that judges should abide, and allegedly took their office as a mean to wealth and privilege, I'm much more pessimistic, especially in terms of also selection of judges, because it looks like judges were only selecting those judges that were in line of their own lifestyle and thinking, and they were not really trying to select the best out of the best. And I mean, the process has been reformed during past few years. I guess it's better, but we will see the changes only in maybe a long-term perspective, because judges will stay with us for decades. And this is also something quite bad for the system. I mean, judges are preserving status quo, but on the other hand, if you want to change judges, it takes time. The only way how you can change the entire system is just to burn the whole thing down to the ground. And I don't think this is a really great example of how the reform should be made. But I don't know if we have any other option after what we saw in the news and what the judges are being alleged from, but we will see.
Thank you very much, Kamil. You referred to burning everything down to the ground. Then we are not much else left with, right? And of course, the field is left fully up for grabs to the arbitrariness of the political powers that be. And this is also one of the questions that we have gotten in the chat room. That is how to really reform this independent or lack of independence of judiciary, or what is still left of it, without opening up the opportunity for politics simply to take over the judiciary with their own loyalists, as it has, for example, happened in Hungary. Maybe, Alan, you spoke a little bit already about the intentions of some political parties in Croatia to implement some of the reforms. And I really wonder, is there in Croatia sort of a perception that there is something deeply problematic with judiciary and that some serious reforms should be implemented that should be actually in everyone's interest?
Thank you, Mate. Well, I would say that there is a almost folklore attitude about judiciary being poorly equipped, being slow, and so on. But it is a rather superficial statement coming from political circles, and it's mainly being used as a kind of political coin in the debates, which is being tossed from one party to another. So if you would say, is there a real awareness that something is deeply wrong, I would then definitely say no. And this is probably a place where Slovakia is in front of Croatia, because it seems that at least the level of open corruption in Slovakia is higher than in Croatia. And then you have a kind of justification for a political consensus to undertake something which would be far-reaching and fundamental. The country which had the best opportunity to really change the trends in judiciary, again, a paradox. Do you know which country is that? It's Albania. Albania in last 5 years had the opportunity to change probably, I think it was something like 80% of Albanian judges. Just Google vetting process of judges in Albania, and you will see that even European Union, which has been following, in my opinion, a rather wrong politics towards the transition countries when judicial independence is being concerned, even European Union has supported vetting of judges in Albania. Because, corruption in Albania was more than an anecdote. It was so ubiquitous that it really became a kind of a first-rate political issue. And I guess that it is well to be seen that in Albania, vetting of judges was in one of the previous years voted to be the #1 event in Albania, even before winning of Albanian soccer team in some important European competition. We are very far from that in Croatia. We are even further than Slovakia, which now undertakes some reforms. So I would say any reforms that are being undertaken right now at the level of judiciary are, squeaking mice, nothing that would really change the matters. And this is why I allowed myself the privilege to dream in the paper which I produced, and I tried to note some issues which I'm very sure that nobody will accept in the political arena. But I think that these issues are, and these possible reforms are rather important, probably the key reforms and the only ones that one can undertake if you don't have this burn everything down strategy at your disposal. So the first thing which I find as a real challenge is how to make room for new judges, because as Kamil said, well, we need new people. We need younger people. We need the next generation that is, well, I don't know if the next generation is politically more educated. I'm afraid not, but probably at least digitally more educated. There may be some hope for that new generation. But how to do it? Now we have a surplus of judges, and we have probably only a very limited number of open judicial spots in Croatia for the next 10 years. So I think that first thing that we need to do is to change the constitution, because I think we have now a rather outdated provision in the constitution, which was, by the way, inserted later in the 1990s or 2000s due to problems which we had. But this is the provision according to which judges retire in the age of 70. And I think this is now a discriminatory provision vis-a-vis all other individuals who work in the other areas. And I think, especially in the current situation, we need to undertake something to change it. Probably not for the judges who are now here, but in order to at least have this for the next generations as something which will assist making room for new people in the judiciary. I think we also need to support a generous retirement scheme for present judges, because currently working in the courts, it's not even a pleasure for judges, and most of them would probably like to leave if granted a good retirement schemes, and this would probably open some new posts for judiciary. And we'll also need to change the reputation of judiciary. It must become a different place than the place it is today. I think, well, we would need to support, well, open debates, the dialogue between judiciary and the society, all sorts of strategies of opening. And again, how to do it? Well, some judiciaries in Europe have special innovation schemes. They allow judiciary to undertake innovation projects. Just take the Dutch judiciary, for instance, which has special pilot courts that can do something in collaboration with the universities and scholars in, let's say, changing the way how they deal with things, showing that they can do it better. So I think these centers of judicial excellence are something that one would need to support, at least to show that something else can be done. And then probably the next generation of people will, which are different people, will come. You need to allow innovation and in that. And then that would probably attract the better students again to come to judiciary. How to actually make the judiciary, especially judicial officials as professionals, a desirable profession. I think what we need to have is something what the French have, to have a special sabbatical for judges who could probably go, well, maybe mandatory sabbatical for judges who would need to go every 5 or 6 years and do something else than adjudicating cases. There should probably be a system of which would stimulate rather than dissuade judges, like now in Croatia, to engage in academic activity. Judges would need to be very much encouraged to know and learn foreign languages, to attend probably international education and training abroad. And then again, there should be some other changes in the system, something that we have now long forgotten. We take it as a part of our socialist tradition, but it's in fact not, if we just take a look at the other areas in Europe. For instance, collegiate adjudication. In Croatia, well, under the heading of efficiency, we have practically removed judicial panels from the first instance courts. Everywhere you have a sole judge, and you even have sole judges in the higher courts deciding important matters. And we never have a really comprehensive panel of judges, like 17 judges at the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. So therefore, I think what we need to do probably also, in order to make some more room for new people, to reintroduce collegiate adjudication, because it is also a way how to foster dialogue, how to make people really debate about ideas and issues. And we would need to bring also some different perspectives into our courts. For instance, I have proposed a reintroduction of mixed panels where at least one judge would be a part-time judge coming from business or coming from specific professional fields or coming from the universities. And I think what we need to reintroduce is effective collateral recruitment of future legal professionals in the courts and state attorneys' offices. What I proposed was something like, well, 1/4 or at least 1/5 of open positions in courts reserved for those who are not career judges, who are switching their profession coming from the other field, which is exactly the opposite from what we have right now in Croatia. Now we have only theoretical possibility that somebody who hasn't been the real insider starting his career from the clerkship in the court would become a judge in any court. And well, again, what we need to have is probably the reaffirmation of orality, of public hearings, of meaningful public hearings, which would then make the meaningful picture of publicity of courts, and that would be then transferred into potential transparency of court work. I think that, well, Slovenia has the same issue, probably the Slovakia as well. Our higher courts do not have trials anymore. There are no public hearings, no public trials, no adversarial proceedings above the level of the appeals court. The Supreme Court has none of it in Croatia, never. And now we even introduce a separate high criminal court in order to relieve the Supreme Court even from appellate jurisdiction in criminal cases, which will be really a criminal act, I think, for the reform of judiciary. So what we need to do is really undertake some, I would say, innovative reforms and change the way how the reforms are planned. I think what we have to realize is that people who need to frame the strategies of development here are not the insiders, not even the outsiders. Judicial administration and planning judicial reforms has become a special profession in itself. And just like you cannot let plumbers design your house, this is how I think that you cannot let state attorneys and judges plan judicial reforms. You need architects for that, and you need solid empirical data, which is now more and more missing. Even though we have a large number of informations, but you don't have essential information on which you can base your reforms. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Alan. Jan, I will ask you, since we're gradually running out of time, I will, to a certain extent, Alan now finished on a note that in fact, the saying that the judiciary can be only changed from inside, that is by bringing change in and upon itself. Now, Alan is critiquing that, and probably he's right. But I'm wondering if we stick to the old mantra that the judiciary can change itself only from inside. Do you see, and you've been a judicial insider for a very long time, are you optimistic, taking into account the kind of people you have worked with, do you see this kind of critical mass of judges coming who could provide an impetus, an incentive for changing this judiciary from the inside? And we need Jan. We don't hear him. Now we will.
Thank you, Matej, for a provocative question. However, I'm not very much optimistic in this respect. Due to the so-called cultural reproduction, the hope that the turnover generation will help and the new fresh blood will bring new ideas and will dismantle the old oligarchic structure doesn't hold. Because due to autocratic renewing of the hierarchical structure, due to strong lobbies networks dominated within judiciary, I mean mostly so-called leadership connected with high public servants in judiciary, will not let to do that, to happen that. They hold firmly all sources in their hands. So, in my opinion, there should be legal amendments, legal changes, and also constitutional changes. The communist hint that should be all burnt reminds me of one of the most renowned Slovenian scholars, hint. He saw that hint, which was short. He said, close all Slovenian law schools and remove all Slovenian judges. So, it's joke, but anyways, it encapsulates two major sources of judicial decay. Namely, as the concept of the rule of law is not so much legal as it is ethical and moral social phenomenon. And since the rule of law cannot be created by law and prescribed by law, the problem does not lie in the formal structure of civilian institutions. Rather, it lies in the substance. And the substance is composed of people, that is judges, not precisely with moral abilities and personal integrity. So it's also the job for sociologists and psychologists, and also for designers of legal framework and constitutional amendments. I may agree with Professor Rizela's statements and proposals. And also I agree with Professor Kahn's findings. And I will only add to this that introducing IQ tests, law school admission tests, and psychological testing of candidates for judicial posts would be necessary. At least it will, in this way, will rule out psychos, sociopaths, and others who are who don't deserve this job. Then also education should be fundamentally transformed. And judicial academy should be established and designed as an institution of permanent and mandatory education of judges. Then Judicial Council should be transformed and the powers of Supreme Court President and Chief Justice should be reduced, not enhanced. And several other moves should be undertaken.
Okay.
So I think that time is.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan. We are indeed running out of time. I thank you. I would like to thank to our panelists for this very interesting, even if worrying facts that we have learned from you. It has been one of the purposes of today's webinar, not really to solve the acute problems that do exist in our judiciaries, but actually to raise awareness about the problems in our judiciaries. With our membership in the European Union, either in 2004 and 2013, a kind of perception, if not even a fiction, developed that we have all become well-ordered societies, and that in a way practice has lived up to the high normative expectations and to the higher normative standards that have been stipulated in our constitutions. The developments in our countries do demonstrate that huge challenges do exist inside our judiciaries, that probably these challenges go beyond the capacity of being resolved in one single generation and by a single set of institutions. It is also clear that these challenges and problems are not well identified or even detected on the European Union's level. And it is also clear at the same time that the weakness of the judiciary that is demonstrated through these pathologies that it has also provides a lot of room for political interference, either an overt or a covert political interference. So indeed, we are facing huge challenges ahead of us, and I'm grateful to you for having shared with us the experience of your countries, for having shared also the potentials for the reforms, and I'm sure our debates will, because they have to continue also in the future. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for coming, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for organizing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.